Jack the Ripper. Terror in the East End. The fog rolls thick through the narrow streets of Whitechapel, East London. Gas lamps flicker weakly against the autumn darkness of 1888. In the shadows between cobblestones, something evil stirs. A killer walks among the desperate and the destitute, leaving behind a trail of terror that would echo through history. This is the story of Jack the Ripper, a name that would become synonymous with fear, mystery, and the darkest corners of Victorian society. Over 13 weeks in the autumn of 1888, at least 5 women would fall victim to a killer whose identity remains unknown to this day. Welcome to the East End of London, where poverty and desperation created the perfect hunting ground for history's most infamous serial killer. Narrator. To understand the Jack the Ripper murders, we must first understand the world in which they occurred. The year is 1888, and Queen Victoria has ruled the British Empire for over 50 years. London stands as the largest city in the world, a sprawling metropolis of 4 million souls. But London is a city of stark contrasts. While the wealthy districts of Mayfair and Belgravia shine with gaslight and prosperity, the East End festers in squalor and desperation. Whitechapel, Spitalfields, and the surrounding areas house over 900,000 people in conditions that defy human dignity. In these overcrowded slums, entire families crowd into single rooms. The smell of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and human waste permeates the air. Disease runs rampant. Cholera, typhus, and tuberculosis claim lives daily. The average life expectancy in the East End is just 16 years. For women, survival often means selling the only commodity they possess, themselves. Prostitution is rampant, with an estimated 1-200 women working the streets of Whitechapel alone. These are not the glamorous courtesans of the West End, but desperate souls, many of them alcoholics, most of them destitute, all of them vulnerable. The police force, established less than 60 years earlier, struggles to maintain order in this urban wilderness. The Metropolitan Police, known as the Met, patrols the streets, but they are understaffed and overwhelmed. In Whitechapel, crime is a way of life, and violence is commonplace. Into this world of shadows and despair came a killer who would change everything. Narrator. While Jack the Ripper may have claimed other victims, 5 murders stand out as the work of the same hand. These are known as the canonical 5, and their stories paint a picture of lives cut tragically short. Mary Ann Nichols, the first victim. The date is August 31st, 1888. Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly to her friends, walks the streets of Whitechapel in search of her DOS money, the 4 pence needed for a bed in a lodging house. At 43, she is a veteran of the streets, a mother of 5 who has been separated from her husband for 7 years. At approximately 3:40 a.m., Police Constable John Neal discovers her body on Bucks Row, now Durward Street. Her throat has been cut twice from left to right, and her abdomen bears several deep wounds. The brutality is shocking, but this is just the beginning. Annie Chapman, the second horror, September 8th, 1888. Annie Chapman, 47, nicknamed Dark Annie, becomes the Ripper's second confirmed victim. Found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street at 6 a.m., her murder is even more savage than the first. Chapman's throat has been cut so deeply it nearly severs her head. Her abdomen has been opened, and some of her organs have been removed with what appears to be surgical precision. The killer has arranged her few possessions neatly at her feet: 2 brass rings, a few pennies, and 2 combs. The precision of the cuts suggests the killer possesses anatomical knowledge. Fear begins to grip the East End. Elizabeth Stride. The Interrupted Kill. September 30th, 1888 becomes known as the Double Event. At 1 a.m., Elizabeth Stride's body is discovered in Dutfield's yard beside the International Working Men's Educational Club. Unlike the previous victims, Stride has suffered only a single cut to the throat. Many believe the killer was interrupted by the arrival of a club member returning from a meeting. The horse and cart disturbed the scene, causing the murderer to flee before completing his grisly work. But Jack the Ripper was not finished for the night. Catherine Eddowes. The same night, a second death. Just 45 minutes later and barely a mile away, the mutilated body of Catherine Eddowes is found in Mitre Square. At 1:45 a.m., Police Constable Edward Watkins makes the gruesome discovery. Eddowes has suffered the most extensive mutilation yet. Her throat is cut, her face is slashed, and her abdomen has been opened from sternum to pelvis. The killer has removed her left kidney and part of her uterus with surgical skill. The speed and savagery of the double murder sends panic through London. The killer can strike twice in one night, moving like a ghost through the labyrinthine streets of the East End. Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim, November 9th, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly, just 25 years old, becomes what most consider Jack the Ripper's final victim. Unlike the others, Kelly is murdered indoors, in her small room at 13 Miller's Court. The scene that greets the police is one of unimaginable horror. Kelly has been mutilated beyond recognition. The killer, working in the privacy of her room, has had time to indulge his darkest impulses. Her heart has been removed and placed on the pillow beside her head. With Mary Kelly's death, the Jack the Ripper murders, as we know them, come to an end. But the terror has only just begun to take hold of the public imagination. Narrator. The investigation into the Jack the Ripper murders represents one of the first major serial killer investigations in modern police history. Leading the effort are Inspector Frederick Aberline of Scotland Yard, a veteran detective with extensive knowledge of the East End, and Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, who coordinated the overall investigation. The police face unprecedented challenges. The crime scenes are contaminated by curious onlookers, the press interferes with investigations, and the killer leaves behind virtually no physical evidence. In an age before fingerprinting, DNA analysis, or modern forensic science, investigators must rely on witness testimony and traditional detective work. The investigation employs hundreds of officers. Police question over 2,000 people, take 300 statements, and investigate 80 potential suspects. They increase patrols in the area, with officers walking beats every 15 minutes. Plainclothes detectives mingle with crowds in pubs and on street corners. Despite these efforts, the killer remains one step ahead. He demonstrates an intimate knowledge of the East End's geography, using its maze of courts, alleys, and passages to appear and disappear like a phantom. The police also face a new phenomenon, media frenzy. The press sensationalizes every aspect of the case, often hindering the investigation. Journalists offer rewards for information, conduct their own investigations, and publish details that contaminate potential evidence. The letters. Perhaps the most infamous aspect of the case involves the letters sent to the Central News Agency and the press. On September 27, 1888, the Central News Agency receives a letter signed Jack the Ripper, the first use of this now famous moniker. The letter, written in red ink, states, "I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled." It promises more murders and threatens to clip the ladies' ears off and send them to the police. A second letter, known as the Saucy Jackie postcard, arrives on October 1st, referencing the double murder of September 30th. Most chilling of all is the From Hell letter, received by George Lusk, chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, along with half of a human kidney claimed to be from Catherine Eddowes. Modern analysis suggests most of the letters are hoaxes, but they contribute to the growing legend and public hysteria. Theories and suspects. The investigation generates numerous theories about the killer's identity. Some believe he is a doctor or butcher, given the apparent anatomical knowledge. Others suggest he is a foreigner, possibly Jewish, playing into the anti-Semitic prejudices of the time. Early suspects include Kosminski, a Polish Jew who lived in Whitechapel, Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher who committed suicide shortly after the Kelly murder, and Dr. Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor with a hatred of women. More exotic theories propose the killer was a member of the royal family, a Freemason, or even a woman disguised as a man. Each theory reflects the prejudices and anxieties of Victorian society as much as any evidence. Narrator. The Jack the Ripper murders created a climate of fear unlike anything London had ever experienced. As autumn deepened in 1888, panic gripped the East End and spread throughout the city. The press sensation. The murders occur at the dawn of the modern press age. Newspapers compete fiercely for circulation, and the Jack the Ripper story provides sensational copy that sells papers by the thousands. Headlines scream of the Whitechapel horror and the leather apron murders. Journalists flock to the East End like vultures, interviewing anyone willing to talk, offering money for stories, and often fabricating details when facts are scarce. The press creates an atmosphere of hysteria that makes rational investigation nearly impossible. The coverage also reveals Victorian society's attitudes toward the victims. The press often refers to them as unfortunates or simply prostitutes, rarely acknowledging their humanity or the circumstances that led them to the streets. Public reaction fear transforms daily life in the East End. Women travel in groups after dark, and many refuse to leave their lodgings at night. The streets that once bustled with late-night activity become eerily quiet after sunset. Vigilance committees form, with local residents organizing patrols and offering rewards for information. The most famous is the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, led by George Lusk, which raises funds and coordinates citizen efforts to catch the killer. But vigilance often turns to vigilantism. Mobs attack anyone deemed suspicious, particularly foreign-looking men or those with medical knowledge. Several innocent men barely escape lynching at the hands of panicked crowds. Anti-Semitic violence. The murders exacerbate existing anti-Semitic tensions in the East End. A large Jewish immigrant population has settled in the area, fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe. They face discrimination and suspicion from their neighbors. When the "From Hell" letter refers to Jews, and when witnesses describe seeing suspicious foreign-looking men, violence erupts against the Jewish community. Jewish shops are attacked, and individuals are assaulted on the mere suspicion of being connected to the murders. The police struggle to maintain order while continuing their investigation. They must protect innocent immigrants while pursuing every lead, no matter how prejudiced its source. The government response. The murders become a political issue as well as a criminal one. Queen Victoria herself expresses concern and demands action. The Home Secretary faces questions in Parliament about the police response. The government offers rewards for information and increases police presence in the area. They also attempt to control the press coverage, which they believe is hindering the investigation and causing unnecessary panic. But criticism mounts as the killer continues to evade capture. The press and public question police competence, leading to resignations and reorganizations within Scotland Yard. Narrator. After Mary Jane Kelly's brutal murder on November 9, 1888, something changed. The characteristic Jack the Ripper murders ceased as suddenly as they had begun. But why? Theories for the end. Several theories attempt to explain the abrupt end of the canonical murders. The most prosaic suggests the killer simply died, by suicide, accident, or natural causes. Montague Druitt, one of the prime suspects, drowned in the Thames in December 1888, leading some to believe he was the Ripper. Others propose the killer was institutionalized in an asylum, no longer free to roam the streets. Aaron Kosminski, another suspect, was indeed committed to an asylum, though not until 1891. A third theory suggests the killer emigrated or was imprisoned for another crime. The transient nature of East End life meant people could disappear without trace. Perhaps most chilling is the possibility that Jack the Ripper simply moved on, finding new hunting grounds where his crimes would not receive such attention, or developing more subtle methods of killing that did not connect back to his earlier work. The investigation continues. Despite the end of the canonical murders, the investigation continued for years. Police followed leads, investigated suspects, and maintained their increased presence in the East End. However, without new crimes to investigate, the case gradually grew cold. Detective files were closed, witnesses moved away or died, and physical evidence deteriorated or was lost. The lack of resolution frustrated investigators and the public alike. For the first time in the modern era, a major criminal case remained unsolved despite intensive investigation and massive public attention. Social impact. The Jack the Ripper murders had lasting effects on British society. They exposed the terrible conditions in the East End, leading to social reforms and improved housing. The case also demonstrated the power of the modern press and its ability to shape public opinion. The murders contributed to changes in police procedure, including better crime scene preservation, more systematic investigation methods, and improved coordination between different police forces. Perhaps most significantly, the case created the template for how society responds to serial killers. The media frenzy, the public panic, the search for patterns and motives, and the lasting fascination with unsolved mysteries. Narrator. More than 135 years have passed since Jack the Ripper stalked the streets of Whitechapel, yet the case remains one of history's most compelling unsolved mysteries. Why does this Victorian killer continue to capture our imagination? The birth of the modern serial killer. Jack the Ripper represents the first modern serial killer to achieve international notoriety. Unlike previous mass murderers, the Ripper operated in an urban environment with mass media coverage. His crimes were documented, analyzed, and discussed in unprecedented detail. The case established many elements we now associate with serial killer investigations: the search for patterns, psychological profiling, media involvement, and public fascination. In many ways, Jack the Ripper created the template for how we think about serial killers. Endless theories. Over the decades, investigators, amateur sleuths, and writers have proposed more than 100 suspects for the Jack the Ripper murders. These range from the plausible to the preposterous. Recent DNA analysis of evidence has eliminated some suspects while potentially implicating others, though definitive proof remains elusive. Each new theory generates books, documentaries, and heated debate among Ripperologists, dedicated researchers who study the case. The lack of resolution allows each generation to project its own fears and anxieties onto the Ripper. He has been portrayed as everything from a Victorian gentleman to an immigrant outsider, from a medical professional to a working-class butcher. Cultural impact. Jack the Ripper has become a permanent fixture in popular culture. Hundreds of books, films, television shows, and games have featured the character. He appears in horror stories, historical fiction, and even comedy. The real tragedy, the deaths of 5 vulnerable women, often gets lost in the sensationalism. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly become footnotes in their own story, overshadowed by the mystery of their killer. Modern investigations. New technologies continue to shed light on the case. DNA analysis, digital crime scene reconstruction, and advanced forensic techniques have all been applied to surviving evidence. In 2019, researchers claimed to have identified Aaron Kosminski as the killer through DNA analysis of a shawl allegedly from the Catherine Eddowes crime scene. However, the chain of custody for this evidence is disputed, and the findings remain controversial. Other investigators use geographic profiling, psychological analysis, and historical research to narrow down suspects or understand the killer's methods and motivations. The East End. Today, modern Whitechapel bears little resemblance to the slum of 1888. Urban renewal has replaced most Victorian buildings, and the area has become part of London's financial district. However, Jack the Ripper tours remain popular, taking visitors to the sites of the murders and the pubs where the victims spent their final hours. Memorials to the victims have been erected, finally acknowledging their humanity rather than just their connection to their killer. These serve as reminders that behind the legend of Jack the Ripper lie real women whose lives were cut short by violence. Narrator. As fog continues to roll through London's streets, just as it did in 1888, we are left with more questions than answers. Who was Jack the Ripper? Why did he kill? Why did he stop? Perhaps the enduring fascination with Jack the Ripper lies not in finding the answers to these questions, but in what the mystery reveals about ourselves. The case holds up a mirror to our darkest fears and deepest curiosities about human nature. In the end, Jack the Ripper succeeded in achieving a kind of immortality that his victims were denied. But in remembering the legend, we must not forget the reality. 5 women died horrible deaths in the shadows of Victorian London. They deserve to be remembered not as mere footnotes to a famous mystery, but as human beings whose lives mattered. The fog lifts from the East End, but the shadows of 1888 remain. In those shadows, Jack the Ripper continues his eternal walk through the corridors of history, forever pursued but never caught, forever feared but never known. The mystery endures, as it likely always will, reminding us that some secrets die with those who keep them, and some questions echo through eternity without ever finding their answers.